I'm your co-host, Peter.
I mean, I feel like I've really done something here if I was able to throw you on the transition. You usually just you just got it, man.
I was busy looking in the wiki to see what the hell these bounty hunters races were called, but I can't. Hazari, that's right. We're getting deep in the season, man, and I am once again reminded at how crazy long old 90s television really used to be, that you would have a TV series run in one season 25 episodes.
Yeah, because they end up breaking it up, right? Like they do the fall part and you've got the winter break and then you come back and you have your episodes through the spring and then you're done before summer. You have the big May sweeps. It seems like an artifact of a bygone era, but I certainly remember it. It was always a huge deal in November, because that's when you started to have your mid-season break, and then everything came back in February, and then everything was done by May. And you basically had to have episodes for half the fucking year.
I gotta say, I respect the cast. I respect the crew to be able to go at what had to just be an absolute grind on those sets to churn out episodes at the speeds they do. And looking back on the past couple years you and I have put into this, the difficulty I have in remembering episodes we talked about just a week or two ago. I don't blame any of the cast members when they're just like, listen, guys, that was not my life. That was just a job. And, I did it and I don't have perfect recall on this stuff. Like if we can't remember this stuff with the amount of effort that we're putting in, I don't fault anybody who's involved in the production of this for not remembering every blistering detail.
I completely agree. It's almost embarrassing to me sometimes how little I remember of our own takes. And those are much more recent than these guys having filmed the show.
Yeah.
And it's because it always is in the current living memory of the people who just consumed it or repeatedly consume it, and not necessarily the person that created it, as crazy as that sounds,
Mm-hmm.
People talk about stuff that we did on podcasts 50 or 60 episodes ago. And I'm like, it's just, what?
You've been doing this 50 episodes? Like what?
We've done 120 episodes now. It's just like, oh, in episode 65, I don't even fucking remember what one that was. What did I say that? I don't know.
As long as I didn't drop the N-bomb, I think we're good.
I did want to share a quote from one of our fans from the Vija Please Trauma Support Group before we got going. And this is about last week's episode, but this is the quality of fan we have. So this is from Soren, and we were reflecting on the David Lynch phase, our episode 120, which was about the fight, the unwanted return of Chakotay's backstory. And he said the following: I recently treated myself to a home viewing of Children of the Corn 2, The Final Sacrifice. Amazon Prime thought I might like it. Perhaps because I once watched Picard? And when a terrible Native American character wandered in, I was delighted to discover he was none other than Chakotay's grandfather. Needless to say, I immediately reached for my medicine bundle.
Was rough. I spent a fair amount of time thinking about his grandfather, the actor, of like, it's got to be rough, man. If you're like, I want to be an actor and this is what I'm going to pursue, and whether it's a elderly Native American or something else, you get stuck as this very hyper specific stereotype, and that's always what you're going to get stuck playing. You're not going to see that guy landing a role as some Silicon Valley influencer or something like that, and it's got to be a rough plight. And I'm not saying this to say that I'm sorry for the hard time we gave him about a shitty performance, but I am saying that I recognize that it's rough to always have to just be that one thing character actor, not because that's what you became famous for, but because that's how you look and that's how you get handled.
It's a rough life being typecast in Hollywood, but it's not it's not one that doesn't go without its paychecks. And speaking of people who cashed paychecks this week, what episode did we watch?
Oh, I thought you were going to say Alex Kurtzman, who I don't think he's cashing any paycheck. I don't want to go deep in the the national affair of Star Trek and where that's going. But I do want to touch base real quick before we jump into today's episode into Lower Decks, which I've been watching, and I will say has been steadily increasing in quality. I still would not put my neck on the line and invite you in to watch it. It's annoying because if you cut the jokey, cartoony, comedy mainline out, you've got these legit post TNG era episodes in the background with some cool stuff going on. Like this episode I just watched had a generational ship they had discovered that was adrift, and there were two. Basically, they're like Miranda class. Like that's what the Cerritos is, the main ship we're following, and they're tractor beaming this to a habitable planet that they're going to terraform with it. And this generational ship is like super huge and this like vast cap. You're always grounded, whether it's Voyager, Next Gen, DS9, whatever, maybe even Enterprise. Like the limit of your creativity is rooted in the budget of your show. And sometimes you go big, you do a timeless, and you have some really cool big budget special effects stuff. But a lot of the times you end up with like Twisted with crappy Adobe After Effects special effects that are cheap and plentiful and whatever. And there's this promise in animation that you can do whatever you want because it's just a stroke of a pen away before you've drawn this picture and you can explore it. So maybe it'll end up being kind of like Orville, where they shove some of the comedy to the side and try and get some legit Trek in there, but we're not there just yet.
It's a shame that something that has a decent Trek premise is being wasted in this way. And it sounds like it's playing out exactly the way I said, which is it's not going to be Rick and Morty enough to be genuinely funny because they're not going to want to expose the IP to that level of black comedy. And it's not going to be Trek enough to really be a good watch for Trek fan purposes. And it's going to be stuck in this overmanaged studio black hole of not funny and not engaging. And I salute you for continuing to go to the Kurtzman mines trying to find that piece of gold that
I will say
you're desperate to locate.
I will say wholeheartedly much better than Picard. I'm enjoying.
Well, that's not hard. Like Picard was actively an affront to human life. Like that was a war crime that we watched in real time. So like didn't murder your parents is probably better than Picard. What I'm saying is Picard killed my dad.
Yeah.
No, he's not really. My dad's alive.
What the man you know as your dad's just a telltale Shiar operative.
No. The man I know as my dad is just a robot that was created after he sacrificed himself for what no reason. I mean, just like he had a ticking time bomb heart like brain issue, but then it just didn't matter.
All right, man. Season 5, episode 20 or 19 if you're cool and go by Netflix like I do. Think Tank.
So this one is notable because of the star power of the guest star, which at the time was the biggest get they could have, which was Jason Alexander, late of Seinfeld, George Constanza. Nothing else about this episode is particularly interesting. It is a quality example of the tendency of episodes of Star Trek Voyager to not respect the intelligence of the viewer.
I disagree and I agree. I disagree with the fact that or your assessment that it was a unremarkable episode, and I wholeheartedly agree that whatever they thought they were doing to be clever and Shyamalanian here was a complete miss, and this was a very transparent episode. And it brings me back to our podcast old question of back in 1999, what was this a good twist? You know,
No. I don't think this was meant to be a good twist. It was meant to be fed like a bottle of baby formula to the audience on purpose because they thought they'd get extra eyeballs because Jason Alexander was the guest star. So they wanted to make it as noob friendly as possible. Like, don't make them think too much. Give them a real simple setup and a real simple story, and see if we can retain some of these people that might tune in because somebody they know is on the show.
I mean,
I
that's
think that's
not a bad
entirely
strategy, right? If you're going to
from a
put that,
marketing perspective. I think it's like, I get the logic, but it's fucking terrible for this show. This is season 5, deep of season 5 of a show on the UPN. Like, who they think is gonna fucking like, oh yeah, I'm gonna totally start watching Star Trek Voyager now because George Costanza was on it. Like, who in their fucking demo is that going to attract back to the show? Like, if you're trying to get that audience that was watching back in season 1, season 2 and bring them back, this isn't what they're looking for, right? This isn't like, oh shit, I'd stopped watching Voyager because I thought it was bad, but oh my god, the guy who goes Jerry is on there now, so clearly it's for me now. Like, no, that's not it. That's not it at all. Like, they were going for the tactic of, we're gonna put a big old guest star on there to get people who like Star Trek and were watching the show to come back to it, they should have done something like some kind of crossover where other Trek figures were on it, or like, here's Captain Picard or something like that. Like, that would have been the way to do that. This is getting nobody that's sticking around. I get the logic though, because fucking studio executives are stupid, and so they would have thought that would have worked.
Here's what I liked in this episode, and this is going to be a little skip to the end. And here's something I will give later seasons, 4, 5, 6, maybe hopefully 7. But ever since we got out of the dried meat is stuck in my hair region of the Delta Quadrant, like the shithead regions.
Yeah, many sectors overwhelmed by the shithead menace. Yeah, it was a dark time.
And for those of you who have not listened to our earlier seasons, there was a notorious thread we felt in season 1 and season 2 where just all these people had some sort of crusty bird nest grown in their hair, and that was their kooky alien thing.
I mean, the Kazon were the ultimate example of that. That they just looked nasty. They just just didn't take showers. Ever.
That's legit, and I think that plays into who they were as a dirty drug dealer culture. I maintain the work.
It's just that everyone else was that way too. It's like, what the fuck?
Well, what the fuck was it? Ex Post? No, was it Ex Post Facto? Was that the shithead episode with the Ninja Turtles?
I don't actually remember the actual name of that episode. I just remember the shithead episode with the Ninja Turtles that LeVar Burton directed, that we got introduced to, like Detective Tuvok. There were
so many terrible first
show memes were launched out of that fucking episode.
But anyways, recent Voyager, I think, has gone above and beyond in producing some cool ass one-off aliens that we get access to. And this episode particularly starts with a textbook example of what I'm going to call wax set cool alien. You got this really cool blue fish guy. He looks great. He looks like he just wandered off the set of Hellboy. Interesting design of alien with excellent prosthetics. You hold this up against even through the majority of TNG, and you still had guys that were basically just dudes in trash bags with like googly eyes posted on them, right? This is some legit cinematic special effects work, and it is in the most boring, basic home basement reproduction fan set possible, right?
Oh yeah, Stevie wandered by just as this guy showed up in the teaser, and she's like, "Oh, that guy looks cool." Like, man, they really started to like do well with prosthetics in these aliens. And then just this set that is a Holiday Inn conference room.
Not even that, man.
Beige walls, like
it looks like
an
elementary school multi-purpose gymnasium that they had just done some children community theater production, and the set pieces or stuff. They're terrible. But I think this episode does a good job of, again, just exploring what is in the universe that is not part of a large galactic empire or some major faction. Who are the independent operators? Stuff like space pirates and things like that, minus that goddamn Da Vinci cartoon episode Taking Flight or whatever that one was. What was that? Concerning Flight?
Yeah, Concerning Flight.
Which should have been good, but wasn't. But I like these small scale gray market operators, and that's what we've got here. We've got a little consortium of smarty pantses who are marketing their superior intellects for great profit. And as this blue fish guy shows up, he wanders around this single room set piece that is functioning as the aliens' base of operation. We see the I don't know, the one guy is like vagina face guy with a bunch of garbage sewn into his jacket. There's a jellyfish in a tube. There's a robot off of Doctor Who, Jason Alexander, who you've mentioned before, which, despite being one of the smartest men in the Delta Quadrant, is not smart enough to know how to brush his hair and just looks like a hobo.
Or he's too smart to brush his hair. I do want to shout out to the other kind of bipedal alien that we see, like his fucking makeup too. I guess it's like Phenom.
You're talking about the vagina face guy?
The guy who can't talk, right? Yeah. His the fucking mask makeup shit that was on him was incredible looking.
Yes. And then there's the last alien, which is like this giant lumbering ethereal space beast that's like in the Phantom Zone. I'm not really sure what his deal was. But it's kind of delivering on this expectation that in outer space, not everybody is a humanoid with 2 arms and 2 legs and walking around at approximately 5.5 to 6 feet tall and fitting through traditional doorways. Like, they really first broached this with Species 8427, where they completely dropped the ball by going too heavy on in-your-face CGI. And I think this is a good example of, like, you're able to accomplish these effects and have non-humanoids that are interesting and engaging and part of the story, and not take you out of the moment because they look so awful and low budget.
So the guy who shows up to negotiate with the think tank about the problem that was solved on their home planet by them, essentially is trying to get out of paying them in this ore that was promised by saying it was destroyed. Say, hey, we take this instead. I think Jason Alexander's like, no, homie, we know you actually have it because, again, we smart. So you should probably give that to us before we undo the fix we made so that your planet didn't, shake weight its way apart into oblivion. And he said, oh, yeah, of course. I will totally pay the VIG to the space mafia here. And so that it'll get my legs broken and exits. And so the setup is transparent from the start. These guys are bad. They are happy to use heavy-handed mob tactics to get their way. And they're apparently, as you mentioned, Galaxy Smarty Pants group.
Are they the mob? Is what they're doing unreasonable? Like, cool looking fish dude, his planet was going to be shattered by earthquakes, and they went to a consulting agency and said, hey, can you please fix it? And they said, sure, here's our contract, here's a price. And then fish guy was like, I'm gonna try and fuck these guys, and I'm gonna come up when I owe them like tons of unobtainium, and I'm just gonna be like, hey, look, here's a fucking rock I was using to hold my door open. These rocks,
like this rock instead.
These rocks, they don't grow locally. It's a big deal. This rock's there. And then Jason Alexander's like, yeah, it's a big deal for your planet, but like that planet across the street, it's made of nothing but these rocks. This isn't the deal. And then the guy lies and, oh, it was destroyed. Like, I see they're trying to like be like, ooh, this is a menacing, cruel think tank, but it's like, no, man, that's business. It's a contract. This dude's trying to back out, and like,
Oh, dude, later on they talk about how they'll destroy planets for pay. I mean, these guys are bad guys. They don't hide that these guys are bad guys. Come the fuck on, dude.
They're not bad. They're business people, man. You know, it's I,
Yes, and their business is termination of life. I mean, they
some
straight out say it. Like, we won't do weapons of mass destruction, but if we're asked to blow up a planet, we'll do it. Like, okay. Yeah, yeah. It's the "Are we the baddies?" speech, right? Like, yeah, pretty sure you guys are the bad guys. Pretty sure there's little skulls on your helmets.
I think they're just they're businessmen with morals. That's my pick on these guys. Anyways, so you know, we get a little zoom in to Jason Alexander squinting as we're left to ponder, like, oh god, he was willing to undo the fix they did to collapse this, which I'll still also maintain is not that bad of a bad guy as far as the Delta Quadrant goes. I want to talk a little bit here about Jason Alexander's performance. I can't imagine the shadow you've painted yourself, or the, you know, the tremendous task and expectation on you to be as different as humanly possible in the next big portrayal you have on TV after having done however many seasons of George Costanza on Seinfeld. So I get what he was going for. I get it was something that had to be radically different than what you've seen before. I don't know if it worked for me. How'd you feel?
I think he did a really good job of doing what he was asked to do, which was kind of be this very soft spoken, very neutral, just very, slightly smarmy, but still approachable. Like there was a clear lane they wanted him to be in, and he was in it. It wasn't anything super special. This could have been some fucking guy doing this, right? Didn't have to be Jason Alexander. I think he did the thing that they asked him to do. And so he was fine. That's my hot take.
I think it felt a little forced, and the positioning of his hands at all times became distracting. He had like this Vulcan steepled fingers, a distraction throughout it. And I don't think it was bad. I think there might have been something better he could have brought to the table, and maybe it was who directed this thing?
Some guy that I've never heard of, Terrence O'Hara. I don't know if he did any other Voyager episodes aside from this.
And this was
yeah, this is it. This is the only episode of Star Trek he ever did. Period. End of story.
Well, it's a shame Potsy couldn't have been in here, because I'm sure planets full of children would have been destroyed, and maybe the crew mutilated some more.
Would have seen it firsthand.
We cut back over to Voyager, and we see Catherine Janeway chilling out in her ready room with perhaps the best hair and the best makeup I have ever seen her in. Like, it's rare I'm ever like, wow, she looks really attractive here, but she looked great. And she has the 1999 version of a fidget spinner.
Yeah, I agree. She was glowing. I don't know why. She just was. And I love the canon that they build into this, that Tom Paris is responsible for like hooking the crew on bullshit that he either finds or discovers. Janeway mentioned the last craze was yo-yos. So to have this idea of Tom Paris like going through like the cultural database and like getting into different shit on the holodeck from different time periods in the past, and like the rest of the crew getting into it because they're fucking bored. Like, guys, I found this dance craze. It's called the Macarena.
He was all about the Charleston when his wife was dying. Guys, you're not going to believe this. Put those yo-yos away. I've got the next big thing. They're called slap bracelets, and they're straight pieces of tin until you slap them to your wrist, and they go on. The more interesting thing to me,
guys, I found something else in the database. It's from 1980s. It's called crack cocaine.
I found this thing in the 2019 archives. They're called vaporizers. Look at me.
I look really cool when I'm using it. Look at this. I need a hat, though. Why do I require a hat? Not a good one, though. A shitty one. One that does not look correct.
I think the more interesting thing here is that bad boy convict Tom is the trendsetter for the ship.
Yeah.
Uh, and I would have been interested to seeing more of that story. Is he intentionally baiting the rest of the crew into these little crazes and fads to kind of like flex and assert some sort of control, you know, or is he just hedonistically indulging himself and other people are observing, legit interesting things he's doing and kind of co-opting it without him necessarily farming the craze intentionally?
I think I can answer that. The answer is based on what we've seen of Tom. He likes to rope other people into his bullshit.
Yes.
He loves to do that. So I have no doubt this is a thing of like, hey, Harry, look at this cool thing I found. Or hey, whoever, look at this cool, hey, Balana. And it just like goes from there. And everyone starts talking about it because there's only like 140 people on the ship. Like, oh, what's this thing? Oh, yeah, let's all do that. Because Tom is unique on the ship as far as we've seen. Although probably some of the key people should be like this too, but they're not main characters. Is that he just doesn't give a fuck, right? He wants to indulge himself. That's what he likes to do. He doesn't care all that much about being an enlightened space person or a Starfleet officer or anything like that. Like that's his job. But when his job's over, he clocks out, right? Ka-chunk, and he hits the fucking holodeck hard. He leaves work at work. He's not like fucking Balana and Harry who are going to be up till 2:00 in the morning drinking coffee trying to solve the next space problem. No. He's like, I fucking drove the ship for 8 hours. It's time to party, right? Like that's Tom. So he gets into shit, and then everybody else, because they're too nerdy, because they're Starfleet officers, so they just live in this mindset of like, oh, I gotta do my fucking fractal equations because there's a space-time butthole. And he's like, hey, yo, dude, here's a yo-yo and some crack cocaine. Well, you smoke the crack and then do the yo-yo. That's what we're gonna do today, because that's what they did in the 80s, apparently.
I don't think you're wrong. I would like to seen a couple more episodes or just something sprinkled in, like some tertiary plot arcs of the crew is bored. And they touch on it here and there, but I don't think it's touched enough, and stuff like this could have played well into it. They're looking for dilithium, Joe. That's the we needed of this episode, and they start flying into a planet that is chock full of dilithium, and everybody's pumped.
Like,
And
hell
then
yeah, some free dilithium. Gonna hit that coin block a few times. Gonna ring up the score. It's gonna be good times.
the whole goddamn planet just blows up. And we find out that it's a trap, that the aforementioned Hazari, which is a race of Klingon-ish warrior people who also speaking in Ninja Turtles, and that's turd with like a poopy turd, Turdles, from the
I
shithead
like that they're
episode.
specifying for anybody that's wandered into this not from episode 3. Like, just in case, guys.
Yeah. Well, if UPN thought they could use Jason Alexander to attract new viewers late season, then it's not without our opportunity to have people that may have just wandered in and not know about our all-time worsts ex post facto way back in the day. So these guys, these Hazari, they're badass, honor-bound, technologically advanced hard asses who are bounty hunters. We get brought up to speed on all that by 7 to 9.
They're
And
space Assamites.
They
are.
Yeah,
They are.
They are. They are.
Yeah.
Hazari, Harzan, Marwan. Yeah, sure, man.
Deep cut.
Voyager narrowly escapes the booby trap, and they don't get any pursuit by these Harzan. And as they'll come to find out in Astrometrics, it's because there are a whole gang of them. They're getting pack hunted, similar to the Hirogen, who had turned it into sport. And they don't know how this could happen. Who, Joe, in the Delta Quadrant could possibly want to put a bounty out on the USS Voyager?
At least it isn't like when Harry Kim's said in Twisted, why would anyone do something bad to us? in this episode, Chakotay actually does give voice to the idea, like, well, we have made our share of enemies. Like, we have pissed in a few boxes of Wheaties in our time, from when we tried to steal shit from Jeff Goldblum and the Skeevians to, the Borg a few times, and then what, the Hirogen, I guess. Like, they took us over, and then they were Nazis, and we were French for a while. It was terrible. I mean, like, he does mention, like, we have some greatest hits of people who want our asses dead. So,
He specifically calls out the Malorn, who were introduced in Night, which is the two-dimensionally evil garbage people. And then your buddies from Counterpoint, the Devore, I believe they were called, who were like the super the anti-psychics.
Yes.
Voyager seems like it's been flying for a while, so I'm always happy to hear shout outs from old names like the Malorn.
Well, I mean, it's all from season 5, though. Like, that's the thing. It's like both of those references are from this season specifically, although there's a reference to prior seasons, and we'll get to it. But
yeah, big news there.
These particular two enemies that they've run into are more recent. Although, what bothered me about it was because of their use of the quantum slipstream drive in Timeless. Wouldn't they be like way, way, way outside the space of both of those races by now? They'd be like 10 years away from them.
Okay, so you're jumping ahead to when the think tank actually says, here's what we want in exchange for your help, right?
No, what I'm saying is, like, why would they think that the specific enemies that are after him would be the Malorn? Because they should be like so far away from Malorn space right now. Like, like, really?
Oh, yeah. So the quantum slipstream was Timeless, or was that Dark Frontier?
It was Timeless. Dark Frontier, they used a transport drive, and they got even further.
So like, that's what I'm saying, though. Like, because I peeked at the Netflix roster, and there is a Malorn episode coming up after this. So like, it is that's why I'm saying, like, how big is Malorn space? How big is Malorn reach? That despite an entire season of traveling at this point, with a couple big shortcuts in there, that they're still within the grasp of this fucking garbage scow race. It's some real interesting geography going on in the Delta Quadrant for season 5. The crew's perplexed, though. Like, these Malorn guys seem like pretty serious business, and there is this chess game unfolding of how are we going to get out here. Like, finally, there's someone who gives enough of a shit about us that they're putting real resources into capturing Voyager, which has been like the running gag since season 1. Is Voyager will show up long enough to stick its dick in someone's mashed potatoes to varying degrees of severity. Some of the biggest ones, of course, being the Vidians, who the Klingon DNA in B'Elanna is the key to stopping the fucking phage, which has ravaged their culture for hundreds of years. The Borg, who want the technology to assimilate species 8472. They've got some big priority bullseyes on their back. And so far, it's only really been the Hirogen that have gone out of their way to say, like, no, we're not going to let bygones be bygones. We're going to hunt you down. And they're like, who wants to go after us? And who is putting this much resource into getting us? And these guys are doing a legit job. Every route they think they have to escape is blocked somehow. And the ones that seem open are theorized to be traps. And it seems like the first time that Voyager's really had to contemplate its next step without being super fucked up and limping along on the verge of blowing up in the process.
It just so happens that while Janeway sits in the mess hall contemplating their current situation, by the way, like, Neelix shows up for his one fucking scene right before this to like pour her some coffee. And I remembered upon seeing him that he was part of this show, because he's barely been part of this whole fucking season. Have you noticed? He had to co-lead with a child actor in his like one starring role this season, right? Once Upon a Time, where it's like him trying not to tell Naomi Wildman her mom might be dead. That's it. That's all this. It's all this filthy space cat's got to do this entire season.
It's a shame. Neelix started off as a terrible character that was a blight, at worst on scenes, and at best kind of this running gag of someone who's actively sabotaging Voyager's progress. But ever since Parturitions, he's had some super solid entries, and I think there's some really good stories that Neelix should be a part of. I still maintain he should have been on Gravity instead of Tom Paris. And you are completely right that this entire season, again, this is a long season, episode 20, and they have not given him anything to do. And it's a shame, and it's something I hope that we see changed by the end of this episode, and hopefully different in seasons 6 and 7. The scene you're talking about, though, and I want to roll things back real quick to how the ship actually escaped the Hirogen or the Hazan trap. They blow up the dilithium planet. The ship flies out. Voyager's shields are down. Some other stuff's fucked up. And Janeway hails them and is like, hey, listen, leave us alone. They're like, you're all fucked up and we're going to get you and don't fight us. And also, if you shoot that gun, you're going to blow up. And she's like, but you're going to blow up too. And they're like, yeah, well, you're not stupid.
You don't know
enough.
You're messing with the trap queen who likes to try and blow up her own ship. Like you miscalculated.
Cut to the mystery machine, and there's Fred Jones making a face because that's my fetish. Janeway's like, mass suicide? Like, Janeway originally petitioned to have the Voyager renamed the Heaven's Gate because she just wants everybody to die on that ship, and any chance she has to endanger everyone's life, she's taking it. She's like, yeah, fuck it. Target the planets itself. So when we shoot the gun, everybody blows up for sure. And Tom throws this line out there like, well, it was just a bluff, right? And it's like, Tom, do you not know you're working for someone who is very clearly has a self-annihilation complex and wants to see the rest of the ship go down with her? Like, come on. But the scene with Neelix you're talking about, she's sitting there with her big laptop. There's like magically leather couches in the mess hall now, apparently. And she's just really stressing out, drinking all the coffee. And Neelix is like, well, do you want to use me as a sounding board? And she's like, or I forget what the exchange is, but basically like, I know this is outside your wheelhouse to hear about crew problems, but it's like, that's all Neelix does. And we talked about it back in Threshold. He's like this epiphany advocate who that's Neelix's like true function on the ship is to sit there, listen to whatever your problem is, throw out some kooky stories about when he was a kid working, on the Kessel Run or whatever. And then you have your like, aha moment. This is how we're going to fix it. But he's not feeling it this time. And he's just like, yeah, you know what? Fuck it. This is your problem. I'm out of here. We believe in you, Cap. And when he dips out, Janeway gets visited by the ghost of Jerry Seinfeld's future.
Yeah, suddenly arriving from nowhere is one space Jason Alexander showing up as, a hologram, but cooler. He says it's an isomorphic projection, which sounds like it's just a fucking hologram to me.
You might remember me from such episodes as I'm crazy and neurotic and I want to kill B'Elanna Torres.
Yeah, that's what they call isomorphs in that episode. You're right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why they decided to call it that when we've established that's what a hologram fucking is.
Just wants to flex.
But he turns off communication, gives him all this advice about how to deal with these guys, and says, "Hey, we're problem solvers. If you want us to give you a hand solving the problem, you can kind of come to us and we can talk over what we can do for you and what you can pay us." And it's just the most obvious setup, right? Like, who the fuck is fooled watching this episode to think, oh yeah, these guys totally aren't the ones who sicked the bounty hunters on them, right? Like,
and that's the real shame of this episode.
It is like it's just there's no mystery to it, and so you're just like, oh yeah, these guys we saw in the teaser that are bad guys are clearly the fucking bad guys here.
The series of events that unfolds here is exactly it's so elementary, right? Hey, we're after rare and unique things, and we'll give you a rundown here in a minute of all the big accomplishments we've had. And sometimes, we're asking for all the rice in China, and sometimes we just want, a cube of bouillon soup. It's we're only after rare and unique things. And January, why don't you come over and discuss it with us? And while you're at it, why don't you bring your ex-Borg, perhaps the only one in the entire fucking galaxy who is also coincidentally the smartest person in the world, smartest human in the world, and just all these rare and unique things wound into one cat suit skin tight package and
Not
bring
only
it
do you
over.
have all of the knowledge of the Borg in your brain, you
Which,
also bring that cat suit.
again, it's fucking ridiculous to me that in her brain, in a implant that's a 2x2 cube, she has the entire collected history of the Borg. Like maybe the Borg really just have they assimilated someone with like baller ass next level storage configure, like just crazy good hard drive game. But it seems ridiculous to me that thousands of cubes and billions of Borg town structures and all that data just contained in whatever. But even sillier is the fact that Janeway decides to go meet on these guys' ship and not bring Chakotay and not bring Tuvok, who's usually her like trusted confidant problem solver guy. She brings 7 and 9, and they agree to let him interface, and she talks to the Doctor Who robot. While that's going on, Jason Alexander kind of does this rundown of the accomplishments that they've done and all these lives they've saved, for something as simple as soup, because the writers love soup and we have to give soup a shout out.
That's
And then the
true.
most,
There's 2 shout outs to soup in this episode, by the way.
what's
Because
the
it's one of
second?
the things that it's one of the things they asked for is a recipe for Neelix's, like lanola root soup or whatever.
Here's where the most important part of the episode comes down, Joe. And you know what I'm talking about. This think tank tells Janeway that they cured the Vidian phage.
Before you say anything, I just want to point out that I so expected this to be a trigger point for you that we discussed in advance of like, and don't worry, Peter, when we get to the part where they just dropped that the phage got cured, like casually to establish credibility for this throwaway episode, I'm going to let you go at it. So here we are. We're here. I'm here for you. Go on.
Why is this not the entire fucking episode? Right? The Vidians are your best effort that Voyager has ever put forward at a persistent villain. Arguably the best implementation of it. So good, in fact, that they basically steal the whole fucking concept for Insurrection or whichever way that went. Like, this is groundbreaking, big deal shit. Okay, and this establishes so much craziness. So much craziness just came on the table. Right, these guys, you're too good to beg Q to get you home, right? I understand it, Jamie, but now you've got these fucking guys and they're like, hey, listen, you got a problem, right? You got these bounty hunters coming after you and they're going to fuck you up, and you can basically sell your soul to the devil, right? Because that's what this is. It's like a crossroad episode. Are you willing to barter with hell to get your wildest fantasies to come true? Like, okay, how about instead of worrying about getting away from these bounty hunters, you say, well, what's the real limit of what you can do here? And when they tell them that we cured the fucking phage for the Vidians all the way back from, when's the last time we see the Vidians? It's like Resolutions or something, I think.
Yeah, season 2, season 3 era.
I'm going to look this up because this is what a big fucking deal this is, right? Resolutions was episode 2, number 25. Okay, so Kess leaves Voyager
Beginning
in
of season 4. Yeah.
season 4. Kess knocked them forward 10 years of travel time, and these guys had access to the Vidians recently. So these dudes have some real.
Well, they went 10 years ahead. So these guys had to be able to traverse Borg space because Kess knocked them through Borg space. Then they got further using the quantum slipstream drive. Then they got further using the transwarp conduit. So you're talking about an ability to travel that's on par with the space dinosaurs. It's just being able to go where the fuck they want. And so there's that. And then, as you were getting at, the Vidians are legitimately the most evil shit we have seen on this show. Like, way worse than the Borg. Like, the Vidians were fucking awful. They're monsters. They were just terrible. Oh yeah, we cured them. We just fucking did that shit.
They were bad because of it. Like that's the interesting thing. Like, bring them back. He says you wouldn't even recognize them anymore. Like, they used to be this beautiful, wonderful, artistic race. Like Dr. Pell, I think her name was, really painted a picture and brought out the sympathy card for what were kind of just like scary horror movie monsters to like this really tragic species, right? As whatever you want to say about this episode is middle of the road, kind of easy to anticipate and easy to figure out as this episode was. Like, had you given me like a real taste of what's life like in the Vidian worlds now, like that would have been awesome. So yeah, the news that they cured the phage, huge. The news that they had access to reach the fucking Vidians in the first place, like, you're gambling over peanuts. You have in front of you right now the opportunity to probably just get home tomorrow. Fuck getting away from these bounty hunters. One of the other accomplishments this think tank says is that they outsmarted the Borg and diverted an entire species from being assimilated by the Borg. Like, if the think tank can handle Borg aggression, if the think tank can go super fast 10 years the other direction, these guys can get you home. So when they put their demands out, and we'll jump forward a little bit here, and super predictably, one of those demands is 7 of 9 join their ranks. Janeway has this little like, oh God, I could save the ship from the monster of the week, but it's going to cost me this crewman. That's not the stakes. It's I can get the fucking crew home tomorrow, and all I have to do is sign off on this very smart people joining a think tank with other very smart people and fix the problem that I've been beating myself up with the majority of season 5, which is I did in fact get everybody stuck because I'm stupid and blew up the caretaker array. Like, the stakes in this episode are epic.
Yet they are not treated that way in any way. And that's the fucking problem, is they put all this shit on the table casually in the way that you're like, oh, we need to set up that these guys are good at what they're doing. So they cured the phage, right? We're never going to fucking use the Vidians again, right? So
Shamefully.
they're cured. So that's how you know these guys are good. That's the writer's logic. That's as deep and as far as I think it went, because that is all the respect that they treat it with. Right? Because they don't get what they've done in the context that we do, because they're not like us. They're just trying to set this up again for the lowest common denominator fan, specifically an episode like this in particular.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cheeky, fun throwaway line, like, oh yeah, I remember the Vidians. Like, you have just made the scale of consequence here fucking epic. And I want to talk about the Vidians a little bit more, because it was like the one good thing out of Picard. How tragic is it that here the Vidians have finally been cured of the phage, only for them to inevitably be assimilated by the Borg within the next 2 decades?
What do you mean? Like, is there evidence that they were assimilated by the Borg and Picard?
Oh no, fuck! It's the Skeevians. That's right. My bad.
Yeah. It's the Skeevians got assimilated.
Well, you know what? If you're going to get the Skeevians, why not get the Vidians too while you're in there? The Borg don't care. Borg don't say no. Maybe that's a second deal the Vidians struck, is to keep the Borg off their ass too.
I mean, they might not have gotten all the Skeevians. They just like got some of them when they were on like some isolated planet somewhere. got their cool Skeevian portals that Voyager couldn't steal correctly.
Yeah, that's such a shame for Voyager though. It's like these villains they try to launch don't really find the right footing, abandon, and it's like the older they get in the series history, the more interesting they get, and the bigger a shame it is that get access back to them anyways.
So I'm looking at the clock right now, and I see that we're at 51 minutes. And you normally this would be like, oh shit, we need to like get going because we're barely in like Act 2 of this episode. But I realize there's almost nothing else to talk about
Yeah, I know.
because the plot is so predictable from this point forward. Like the most interesting thing to talk about here is Jason Alexander's on the episode and is fine, and holy shit, the Vidians apparently got cured by these guys. What the fuck? What the hell? Oh man, don't you remember when this show had good antagonists? I do. And then after that, it's very paint by numbers.
There's a silly part in there where they find out that dun 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 the Malorn who have in the Malorn are the garbage scow people who have contracted the Hazari to bounty hunt Voyager was in fact Jason Alexander disguising himself as a hologram because they wanted to just bring in Seven of Nine, and they were going to create an artificial problem that they could only be the cure for, so they could recruit her. These Hazari guys, like this is the big fail, minus all that other stuff I pointed out earlier. It's like they're supposed to be honor bound and all this other stuff. Like you can't bribe them, you can't offer them more money than the previous guy was. Like if they accept a contract, they're gonna go hard on it. But
as
then
I said, space Assamites.
Janeway's like, the guy who hired you was wearing a disguise, and they're like, oh fuck, well, you know what, whatever, yeah, let's have a montage scene where I'm in the boardroom with you guys, and we've got our own little think tank, and we're gonna figure out how to outsmart the smarty pants. It was such a botch to me that you build these guys up to be stone face honor bound killers who just,
and then immediately on the drop of a hat that they've been deceived, they're like, yeah, well, fuck those guys, we'll kill them instead.
We hate being tricked, fuck that. I mean, they say
honor bound except if you be tricky. In that case, fuck you.
You lie to me and I'll burn your fucking house down. The Hazari guy, once he warms up to them, is like, yeah, I know who these dudes are, I know them by reputation, and there's a lot of people who don't like these guys because they probably didn't respect the contract they got into them with, and these dudes fucked them. So again, I'm not blaming the think tank. I'm on the think tank side. You renege on a contract, you get what you get. But the Hazari decide to play ball, and they lay a honeypot trap, and
the big thing is 7 of 9. Like she solves the fidget spinner. To like lay down we have to cheat to win, and that somehow
the aha moments in Voyager, it needs to stop. I'm so tired in 90s television, like we're gonna do something completely unrelated to what the main problem is, and then we're gonna have our epiphany moment where we relate underwater basket weaving to how we're gonna stop the sun from exploding. Oh my god, it's so simple, we just do it underwater, whatever cockamamie thing they have. Like this episode specifically with the fidget cubes seems much worse than other times we have that unrelated epiphany. Like it's shoehorned in there so bad. Again, you said it feels a little paint by numbers. It's another the hubris of man, and here's the women who are smarter, and there's Janeway throwing her little quippy ha, you might want to think your way out of this one, whatever. 7 of 9 basically uploads a virus into the ship, and the big weakness of this think tank is that they're all so radically different. None of them are able to cross communicate. So once they destroy this fucking telepathic disco ball built into the floor, nobody can talk to each other anymore. And then when the Hazari, whatever, start attacking them, they are really in a bad place, and Voyager is able to just slip off. So you don't know what happens. Does the think tank survive? Does the Hazari get their bounty prize? We don't know.
What I was getting at was 7 of 9's intelligence is at least the plot point here.
Yeah.
Like you were mentioning before when you're going on it's so ridiculous that she is the repository of all of the Borg's, knowledge or whatever. And at least that is specifically the reason why they want her, right?
Yes.
So like, I can respect that. All right, so if they're going to set the honeypot trap, at least they're using 7 of 9 effectively to say, okay, well, if this is going to be a thing, then let's do this. So that I'm kind of grasping at something to say positively about the setup of the plot of this episode. It's just not particularly interesting because it's not respecting the intelligence of the viewer.
If you had just said it is the Malorn who's trying to get these fucking, who put bounty hunters on Voyager, it didn't have to be this silly double trap where the think tank engineered a situation where Voyager predictably would have fallen in its grasp. Like, there was nothing wrong with there being a third party that wants Voyager held accountable for its actions. And you've got this
But
skeevy...
Peter, dude, they have to be so tricky and be setting up all the pieces on the board because they're so smart. And the fact that they just cured the phage isn't good enough. Somehow,
had this episode just been like, the Skeevians or whoever did contract the Hazari, the Devore, right? Because when the higher ups in the Devore actually did find out that they let a ship full of telepaths escape, like, people were pissed about that and put bounty hunters out there. And then the think tank, being opportunists, are like, oh, these guys are in trouble. We can like squeeze them and profiteer on this. And same way, like kind of like that Q dynamic, like, I'm here and I can help you, but Janeway's too proud to take the help, and in the end they're like, hey, we did it ourselves, we didn't need a magic cheat code to do it after all, fuck you. And then the think tank's like, well, okay, well, fuck you too. Like, you could have played it straight and it could have been a better episode. I don't think this was bad. I enjoyed it. It had some cool alien stuff going on. It had some neat private organization interaction with Voyager. You had a lot of good callbacks to other stuff going on in the Delta Quadrant. You had some real botches where they put opportunities on the table that completely went unnoticed with ridiculous scale. I think the think tank, if they survive the Hazari ambush, would be a really good ongoing villain for Voyager to have to deal with, but I'm going to go ahead and predict we never hear from these guys again because Jason Alexander is expensive.
I would assume so. I think he did Star Trek though. I couldn't
Pro
see
bono.
anything of it. I didn't see anything in Memory Alpha for this episode specifically that suggests why he did this. I assume it has to be that he's a Trek fan. I'm sure that's somewhere, right? I'm sure on the internet somewhere that information is found because I don't know how they'd afforded him the first fucking time, right? Like, I don't what the hell. It has to have been done, like you said, pro bono.
I want to jump back to the quantum slipstream that you mentioned before. Like, I don't... Voyager never actually... No, you're right. They do. They do go into the slipstream and timeless, and it's the fact that they abandon. So they get a little bit ahead of it, but it's not a prolonged burst. So, like, I think they shave a couple months off the trip effectively.
No, it was years. It was years off the trip from that short time.
And that really is an impressive amount of distance that these fucking guys were able to cover. That's Kess's 10-year push. That's Borg boom tube transwarp, and that's the slipstream. Like, that's crazy. Janeway is a fool. Janeway's a fool. End of story.
It's the writers. I just like, it goes all the way back to the first goddamn episode we did. These writers just don't know what the fuck they're doing, and they make people look like fools because they don't understand what they're putting on the goddamn table.
Yeah.
And that's what happened here.
I mean, did you like the episode?
It was fine. Like, after having to watch the fight last week,
please don't mention
I'm just like, shrug my shoulders. Like, it was over. I mean, it was just kind of like a C, just a flat gentleman C. It will pass. The only thing that sticks out in my memory is the Vidian line and the fact that Jason Alexander's in it. Those are the two things I remembered from the last time I watched it.
You didn't think the aliens look cool though? I mean, like, that's
the first one did. The first alien we saw does look cool, and that was
I like
cool
the big ethereal Cthulhu monster in the Phantom Zone. I thought that guy was really cool too.
Cool idea, but they don't show you.
And that's the strength of it. Instead of trying to get like up close and personal and show you how bad the CG is, it's just the shadowy thing in the background. That's an idea and a concept, and that's and that's cool. I liked it. It was good. It wasn't great, but it was.
Your standards have gone down so fucking
I'm a
far.
beaten dog, man.
You are.
I take the
and
safe harbors where I can find them.
I'm ashamed to know you. And speaking of that, what are we watching next week?
Coming up next, we're gonna be moving into season 5, episode 21, Juggernaut, and the Malorn, who we have just discussed very heavily, and that's our local blue collar sludge slinging Captain Planet
villains.
who
Yep.
do not need to be Captain Planet villains and are only done so because of lazy 90s eco writing. After answering a Malorn freighter's distress call, Torres, Neelix, Chakotay, and their surviving Malorn have 6 hours to stop a theta radiation fallout. I see Neelix. I see Torres. We never really pair Torres and Neelix. I see Neelix and Chakotay, who there's some catty nonsense that goes on there that I enjoy. Malorn, who I think could be interesting if the writers gave him any respect. Like, I'm looking forward to this episode, Joe. What do you remember?
I remember this has to do with Torres a lot, and some more like Malorn being Captain Planet villains. I forget like how much this might be the Neelix episode we've been looking for. I don't remember how much he factors into it. I know this is a B'Elanna episode for sure. So
B'Elanna's due for an episode too. I don't think we've really done anything with her since
No. We've done a couple with her this season, sir. Let's back that up. Like we've had Extreme Risk, when she's had her secret Cardassian racist murder cave. Obviously, classic. She's
and she died on the table in Tom's Silver Blood alternate reality. She really hasn't
best scene that they've ever had
in the
together
flesh.
as a couple.
No, not in the flesh. Nothing Human. Which
and then Nothing Human when she had the alien attached to her face after her dog died IRL. So that wasn't great.
I don't know. I'm looking forward to this one. Hopefully they can pull the Malorn out of the trash and do something reasonable with him.
All right, man. Well, thanks so much to everybody within the sound